What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Empire Sports Talk. I am your host, Roman Gennaro, and let's talk about NFL Week 1. Alright, so I'll let you in on a little secret. This is a bit of a trial run. We're going to go through each game in week 1. We're going to see how this works because I am playing with the idea of, at the beginning of the 2026 baseball season, doing a, if not daily, maybe 2-3 times a week baseball show going over results and storylines from a possibly day-by-day basis, if not a couple times a week. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of, take this for example. I'm talking about the games from NFL Week 1, and I had to wait, obviously, for Monday Night Football to be over. And it is Tuesday afternoon as we're recording this, and it'll be Wednesday afternoon by the time this goes live. So it'll almost be Week 2. So I'm trying to figure out the logistics of could I do a daily baseball show. But this is a trial run of that. We're going to go through Week 1, all the big storylines. Week 1 is finally here and in the rearview mirror as we get ready for Week 2. But let's go over what we have to talk about. I have a few questions that I saw that I want to pose, a few talking points, a few players and teams and units that I want to highlight, and so we'll go through each of those. So we'll start from the beginning. Thursday night, the Eagles played the Cowboys, and I do have to say, even though the Eagles won this game, I do have to give some credit to the Cowboys. This was a situation where most people, including myself, expected the Eagles to run away with this. In my NFC East video, I predicted the Dallas Cowboys to finish last behind the New York Giants. We'll get to them in a little bit, but I have to honestly say I am pleasantly surprised with what I saw from the Dallas Cowboys, with it being 21-20 Eagles at halftime, and the final score ended up being 21-24. Dak led the game in passing because Jalen Hurts only had, I think it was 152 yards, but Jalen Hurts continues to do whatever it takes to win football games. He was the team's leading rusher because Jalen Hurts also had 14 carries for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, and you do have to take those touchdowns as a grain of salt because with the Eagles, there's always a pretty good chance it was a tush-push. But I do want to give credit where credit is due in the Cowboys making this a closer game than I thought it would be, so we'll have to see if they can continue this level all season without Micah Parsons and with George Pickens as a second weapon to CeeDee Lamb, who registered 7 receptions, 110 yards, because they got to figure out something with that run game because what they have isn't going to do it. All right, on to the Friday game in Brazil. Another surprise, I have to give it up to the Chargers defense here. Justin Herbert, only 9 incompletions on his way to 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. To me, the score does not dictate how not pretty this game was for the Kansas City offense. Travis Kelce was relatively quiet. Hollywood Brown did have 10 receptions for 99 yards. I had him on my bench in my fantasy league, and it cost me the opening matchup. But it just seemed to me that the shocker was the Kansas City defense. It seemed like Justin Herbert had all day to throw, and when he did, there was nobody around the Los Angeles receivers. So it just seemed like the Chargers offense had a field day here. The Kansas City Chiefs start 0-1. Is their reign possibly coming to an end, or did the Chargers just play that really well? We will keep an eye on that. I do think the AFC West is going to be a fascinating division to watch. Now we're going to move to the NFC South. It was a divisional matchup between the Buccaneers and the Falcons. There was a lot to like here. It was relatively low scoring for what I was expecting. It was 23-20 Tampa Bay. But both quarterbacks here, man. First of all, I want to talk about Michael Penix. He was 27-42 for 298 yards. Baker Mayfield led the Tampa Bay offense in rushing. And Bijan Robinson actually led the Falcons in receiving, and Darnell Mooney did miss that game. But what I want to talk about is I don't think we are giving the Bucs enough credit. The last couple of years, it's like, oh, they're a playoff team. They're pretty good, whatever. This team, I think, could be really, really good in the NFC. All the talk in the NFC South in the offseason has been about the Atlanta Falcons. I do think both these teams will make the playoffs, but Tampa continues to show that they should not be slept on. And now with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Emeka Egbuka in that receiving core, that could be really dangerous, which leads me to my first highlight. I want to give it up to Emeka Egbuka, who in his first NFL game, and there was a lot of talk about him in training camp, that how much he was impressing this Tampa Bay team. In his first action in the regular season, 4 receptions, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns, which proved to be crucial as it was just a 3-point game. So I want to give it up to Emeka Egbuka for a stellar rookie debut, and I think we're not taking the Buccaneers seriously enough. Up next in the AFC North is the Bengals and the Browns, where they played to a 1-score game. And this one was a bit of a surprise to me. Joe Flacco did outdo Joe Burrow in this one, passing for 290 yards and a touchdown. He did have a crucial interception at the end of the game to seal the game for Cincinnati. But what was surprised to me, there's all this talk about how bad Cincinnati's defense was, and they definitely were a year ago. The 2024 Cincinnati Bengals would be jumping for joy over their defense only allowing 16 points. And so that's what the surprise was. They allowed 16 points, only scored 17. High-stress games in Cincinnati, no matter the score. But Cincinnati does start 1-0, which is a welcome sight for Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow, who traditionally don't really start that well the first month of the season. So, ugly or not, a win is a win. Bengals 1-0. One of my favorite games of the week, because there was so much noise surrounding this team, the Indianapolis Colts absolutely trouncing the Miami Dolphins 33-8. And that 8 was at the end. This at one point was a 30-0 game for Indianapolis. They turned Tua over twice early. I think it was the first or second play from scrimmage. Tua throws an interception, and then the first play of the next drive, he fumbles. And it really put the Dolphins' backs against the wall. We saw frustration from Tyreek Hill in that one. But what I really want to talk about, and it's my second talking point, Daniel Jones, humorously nicknamed Indiana Jones. All of the talk this offseason about that quarterback battle. And Anthony Richardson is the 4th overall pick. You got to play him. He has the highest upside. You got to play him. Daniel Jones is washed up. He's got a 24-44-1 record. All of this stuff. Daniel Jones was dang near perfect in this game. 22 of 29, 272, and a touchdown. And that was a sizable touchdown to Michael Pittman, who had 6 receptions for 80 yards. Jonathan Taylor, 18 carries for 71 yards. This was one of the most well-rounded games the Colts have seen in years. And you could say, oh, it's because they played the Dolphins. The Dolphins are a mess, whatever. But you got to win the games that are in front of you. And with all the talk about Daniel Jones is washed up, they should pick Anthony Richardson, who should do it. I think it's clear they made the right decision. And there was even a talking point early in the game where the announcer was talking about, and I don't think he meant this as a slight to Anthony Richardson, but I caught it that way. It hit me that way, where he said the consistency of Daniel Jones just being able to get it to his receivers, that's really important. And so Daniel Jones coming out with a dang near perfect day, only 7 incompletions, when you got a guy like Anthony Richardson on the bench who struggles, who has had games where he's just had 7 completions. And I thought it was pretty telling after the first touchdown of the season, the touchdown to Michael Pittman. Right after the play, they panned to the bench, and Daniel Jones is sitting right next to the iPad going over the play with the coaches. Anthony Richardson is there, but he's having a full-on conversation with Michael Pittman, who's sitting next to Daniel Jones. And I was like, how telling is it? And they might have caught him at the wrong minute, but it's like you're having a conversation, not paying attention to the iPad, when they're going over why the guy who just beat you out got a touchdown. So this game showed me that I think Indianapolis made the right decision in their QB battle, and they looked really, really good. This could be a playoff team. And the addition of Lou Anarumo as the defensive coordinator, that defense looked great. But that could just be because they're playing the Dolphins. The Dolphins are already not looking great, which leads me to one of my questions for this video. Is Tua's job in jeopardy? And I heard this question posed on ESPN this morning, and my first thought is, this season, no. But going forward, absolutely. Because his backup is Zach Wilson. And I don't think anybody's in danger of losing their job to Zach Wilson. But the draft is going to be loaded at quarterback. And judging by week 1, the Dolphins are going to have an early pick. So there's going to be a lot to choose from. And if it were me, honestly, and I said this at the time, if it were me, I don't think I would have stayed the course with Tua after his last concussion. I honestly don't think he should be playing football. I know there are others out there that disagree with me. And so I don't think this has anything to do necessarily with that. But it's just, I think his best days are behind him because of all those concussions. I would not have moved forward with him after that last one. So I do think his job is in jeopardy, just not in 2025. I think it's in jeopardy going forward. Up next, we're going to go to the Raiders and Patriots. The Raiders won this one 20-13. It was a low-scoring game. Geno Smith, though, passed for 362 and 1 touchdown. There were a lot of games where the numbers weren't stellar. It's week 1, that's going to happen. But whenever there were big yardage, I feel like you need to call it out. Ashton Jeanty had a touchdown in his debut, just 38 yards rushing, but he did find the end zone. And I do think this Raiders team, I don't think they're a playoff team, but this AFC West, I've said it many times, I think could be something really, really fun to watch. The Raiders start 1-0. Next, we go to an NFC matchup, the Saints and the Cardinals. Not much to say about this one. The Cardinals won this game 20-13, but Spencer Rattler led the game in passing with just 214 yards and 0 touchdowns. But the interesting thing is Spencer Rattler had 27 completions. He threw the ball 46 times, had 27 completions, just 214 yards. That is an average of less than 8 yards of completion. And the Saints don't have a ton of weapons outside of Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara. And we know their defense isn't great. So this stat line doesn't surprise me. Just 13 points, even though he completed the ball 27 times. I don't have high hopes for the Saints after their first-round quarterback did not win the job. I don't have high hopes here. This next one's a surprise. The Steelers and the Jets. Aaron Rodgers made headlines by saying he was glad to beat everyone associated with the Jets. This raised an interesting question. The Steelers won this game 34-32. Aaron Rodgers looked as good as he's looked in a couple of years. As good as he's looked since he was in Green Bay. 22 of 30, 244, and 4 touchdowns. Breece Hall had 19 carries, 107 yards. Garrett Wilson had 7 receptions, 95 yards, and a touchdown. This was another thing that could have won me my fantasy matchup. Left Garrett Wilson on the bench. Left a lot of points on the bench. Still almost got the highest score for the week in my league and still managed to lose. Left a lot of points on the bench. But the story here and the question to ask is, because the Steelers won the game, Aaron Rodgers looked good, but they only won by 2 points, and that's because Chris Boswell made a 60-yard field goal to win the game at the end. Is the Steelers' defense bad, or are the Jets better than we think? And I've thought about this, and I think it's pretty clear that the Steelers' defense just isn't good, or at least they weren't very good on Sunday. This says more about the Steelers' defense. Because when I look at the Jets, and I haven't passed the Justin Fields slander the way that some have in the past few years. But when I look at the coaching staff, because you think about like the turnaround that Alex Smith had when he went from Mike Singletary to Jim Harbaugh. You think about some of these instances where guys get with certain coordinators, quarterbacks coach, head coaches in it, and it unlocks them. And so the question that immediately comes to mind is, did Justin Fields get unlocked? And the answer, if you look at the stats, isn't necessarily a yes. I mean, he was very efficient. He was 16 for 22 for 218, an average of 9.9. So it's not awful. And he also rushed for 48 yards. But when you look at the coaches, it's like there's not a Harbaugh on this thing to unlock him. Aaron Glenn is the head coach. He spent last year in Detroit, but he's a defensive guy, and traditionally quarterbacks don't flourish under defensive guys if they haven't already. And then you look at the offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, and he spent the last couple of years with Detroit as well. He was the passing game coordinator. And the quarterback's coach, Charles London, which this is his fourth stop as quarterback's coach. He last was the quarterback's coach in Seattle with Geno Smith. Before that, Tennessee. Before that, Atlanta. So there's nothing that jumps out at me that says, oh, this is the reason that Justin Fields is taking this huge step forward. He didn't look bad, but I think this says a lot more about a Pittsburgh defense that has Jalen Ramsey, that has TJ Watt back. I kind of expected more, so we'll have to see going forward if they're better. And I will say Jalen Ramsey did put one of the biggest hits I've seen in a while on Garrett Wilson. I was legit concerned for him towards the end of that game. But it does raise questions about that Pittsburgh defense. Next is Washington versus the Giants. Not much to say here. Washington won 21-6. Russell Wilson did not look very good. There's a report that Brian Daboll has already scheduled a meeting with ownership. Maybe he's already had it, asking permission to start Jackson Dart. And I'm sure fans are restless as well. Managing just 6 points after vibes with Jackson Dart in the preseason and in camp were really, really good. And we had actually some promise for the Giants in 2025, and then to come out and lay 6 points. And for Jaden Daniels to be 19 of 30, 233, 1 touchdown. Oski Merritt, who took the team by storm and won the starting job. 10 carries, 82 yards, a really good average of 8.2 yards carry. Touchdown. Deebo Samuel in his Commanders debut, 7 for 77. Not much to say here. I expected the Commanders to win, but I expected more from the Giants. I'm sure we'll see Jackson Dart very soon, if not next week. This one surprised me a little bit, and it was the Jags-Panthers. The Jags won 26-10. Trevor Lawrence, 19 of 31, 178 yards. A lot of stat lines sub 200. You chalk that up to week one. Travis Etienne had maybe his best career day. I had him in fantasy a year ago, and he gave me nothing. 16 carries, 143 yards, an average of almost 9 yards a carry. Tedero McMillan was the leading receiver. He should have won the best receiver in college football a year ago, but that went to Travis Hunter simply because he plays both ways, not because he was the best receiver. 5 receptions, 68 yards, no score. I expected more from Carolina. I expected more from Bryce Young after we saw him really finish the season really well a year ago. He only went 18 of 35, 154, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. I picked him as my Writers Association Most Improved Player prediction. And week one, not off to a great start. Jags start 1-0. So it is the Colts and Jags on top of the AFC South after week one, starting 1-0. And that is because the Titans lost their first game to the Broncos 20-12. Neither quarterback in this game looked particularly good. Both under 200 yards. Bo Nix had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. I did predict him to have a bit of a sophomore slump. But Cam Ward in his debut, 12 of 28, 112, and no touchdowns. I'm not expecting a lot from the Titans as a team, but I do expect to see improvement because I like the culture changes that are happening in Tennessee. But as of now, they start 0-1. Broncos 20, Titans 12. The 49ers beat the Seahawks 17-14. Rather low-scoring game. A bit surprising because I expect the 49ers to bounce back this season. They did have a lot of injuries, and it got worse as George Kittle was out multiple weeks with a hamstring issue. But Brock Purdy went 26 of 35, 277, and 2 scores, including the game-winning touchdown late in the fourth. Christian McCaffrey, 22 carries, 69 yards. Also was second on the team in receiving offense, 9 receptions, 73 yards, for a total of 142 yards from scrimmage. Great day for CMC. Good to see him healthy again. But a big loss losing George Kittle for a number of weeks. But George Kittle did tally 4 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown before his injury. But they will have to recover from that. Nothing of note for Seattle. Sam Darnold, just 150 yards passing, no touchdowns. Zach Charbonnet and Kenny Walker continue to split the rushing duties, although Charbonnet had the better day. 12 carries, 47 yards, and a touchdown. Kenneth Walker just 10 carries for 20 yards. But San Francisco comes out on top, playing the league's easiest schedule, which is one of the reasons I expect them to bounce back. Another surprise, which leads me to one of the other units I want to talk about, which is the Packers coming out and beating the Lions 27-13. Now, I know the Lions lost a lot in the coaching ranks. They lost both coordinators. We mentioned their quarterback's coach. They lost a lot. But the Packers just looked really, really good, which leads me to one of my questions, which are the Packers the best team in the NFC? Based on what I saw in Week 1, I would say yes. I do think they looked better than the Eagles, but as a whole, I would say until you knock off the defending champs, that's hard to say. Micah Parsons did not play a full game, but he did affect that defense. After just being traded a few days ago and then having his injury issues, he was never going to play a full game. But the Packers' defense was everywhere. The Packers' defense looked suffocating to this Lions offense, which we expected a lot from, even with the departure of Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator, and just 13 points, and they all came in the second half. The Packers shut the Lions out in the first half. Jared Goff did have a really efficient game, going 31-39 for 225 yards, but managed just one touchdown. This game was all Green Bay from the very beginning, and that was a big surprise. The Rams beat the Texans 14-9 in the lowest scoring game of the week. And I did see one of the most ridiculous takes online this week where somebody was like, let's be honest, and then proceeded to say that Anthony Richardson was better than CJ Stroud. And judging by watching NFL football, I would question if you had eyes if you said that. Because even with offensive line issues and injury issues and this game, I've never quite seen a quarterback able to put the touch on the ball that CJ Stroud was able to in his rookie year and even some in his second year. So I just chalked this up to Week 1. There's a lot of these stats, a lot of these things. I chalk it up to Week 1. Matthew Stafford had 245 and just one touchdown. CJ Stroud, not terrible, 19-27, just 188. No touchdowns, one interception. And it's, again, chalk it up to Week 1. Could be better, but that offensive line needs help. They didn't really do much to address it. They lost Laramie Tunsil, which was a big deal. This could be a bit of a rough year for CJ Stroud, but I still have high expectations for him. He was sacked 3 times. I think they just got to protect him better. If it's make an in-season trade, you got to do it. He's too valuable to this franchise. If they fix this offensive line, I think Houston is still by far the favorite in the division, but I just think there's, between injuries and offensive line, it's leaving the AFC South wide open. Then you have Sunday night, which might already be the best game of the year. The Bills beat the Ravens in an improbable comeback, 41-40. The Bills were down 15 with 5 minutes to go and somehow managed to win this game. I don't want to do a full recap because honestly, whenever I think about that game, my head spins. But I do want to mention a stat that popped up to me, which is crazy. Derrick Henry went off in this game. It looked like Baltimore was going to run away with the game because of the way Derrick Henry was running the ball. He had 18 carries, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And this is the stat that really blew my mind. He had 100-plus yards in the first half, 101 yards in the second quarter alone, which was the 6th time in Derrick Henry's career that he's had 100 yards in a quarter. Mind-blowing to me. I mean, we knew he was good, but 600-yard quarters in his career. But the story here is the Buffalo Bills. Take nothing away from the Ravens' offense, which did its thing. But I really thought this defense was better. We're a year removed from them being the best defense in the NFL, and it is Josh Allen and the Bills, but 41 points and 15 in the final 5 minutes. But this says more about Josh Allen and the Bills. This looked like a team that cannot be stopped. This team looked like a locomotive. And Josh Allen coming off of an MVP season, he's happier than ever if you talk to him because he's married. I just think nothing's going to stand in his way. There was something that came out the other day that kind of put into perspective Josh Allen, which was, imagine if Josh Allen retired right now, right this second. That's basically what Andrew Luck did. Late 20s, coming off of an MVP caliber season, quarterback of a contending team. If Josh Allen retired right now, that's exactly what Andrew Luck did. That's a crazy stat to me. But game of the year possibly on week one, and I've said it before, I say it again, of all the primetime games, Sunday Night Football consistently delivers the best game of the week. And then last but not least, Vikings-Bears. Watching that second half last night, I thought we were going to be talking about a much improved Caleb Williams. And he did look better. He made some really good plays, finishing 21 of 35, 210 yards and a touchdown. He looked like he was making better decisions. He did miss a wide open DJ Moore late in that game, which I don't understand that at all. He had a clean pocket. He had time. DJ Moore got behind the defense, and he just missed him by a lot. DJ Moore was going to the pylon, and Caleb Williams threw it 5, 6, 7 yards out of bounds over his head. With as open as DJ Moore was, I watched that and I said, wow. But the story in this game was the furious comeback led by J.J. McCarthy in his first NFL start. He missed all of last season with injury, so he's effectively a rookie, but he's been in the system for 2 years, which is an important thing to point out. Just 13 of 20 for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. But that interception is important because it was after that interception that J.J. McCarthy, I mentioned Jalen Hurts earlier doing whatever it takes to win. That's what J.J. McCarthy looked like at the end of this game. Minnesota outscored the Bears 21-7 in the fourth quarter. J.J. also had 2 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. He had 10 rushing touchdowns his entire career at Michigan. He's got 1 in 1 game at the NFL level. And I said this when he was still in college and people kind of laughed at me, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Joe Burrow in that he can move, but he doesn't do it regularly. He can move when he needs to. He's much more stand in the pocket, make the throw, don't shy away from the contact and do what you have to do to win. And that reminds me of Joe Burrow a little bit. And we saw flashes of what could be at the end of this game, even though stats they're not eye-popping. Caleb's were better. But you saw at the end of that game, with as fired up as Kevin O'Connell was, with as fired up as JJ's teammates were when he hit that rushing touchdown, Minnesota's got their guy, and they really like J.J. McCarthy. And at the end of that game, we saw why. So that wraps up week 1 of the NFL season. Cannot wait for week 2, which kicks off Thursday night with the Commanders at Packers. And after what we saw in week 1 from Green Bay, I cannot wait for this game. But until then, this has been a week 1 recap. Let me know how I can make this better, because if I start doing a daily baseball video or a daily baseball sub show, I want to make it as good as possible. It's going to be something like this, but maybe talk about storylines as well outside of the games. If there's any ways I can improve it, and the daily show is going to be titled, tentatively, Empire on Deck. So let us know what you think about that. Until then, I am Roman Gennaro. This is Empire Sports Talk, and this has been the NFL Week 1 recap. I'll see you on the next video.